holidays are always linked to Bing Crosby's classic songs, whether they're on the radio, in movies, or shops. Crosby gained the title King of the holiday season with songs that people still listen to every year, even though he was also a famous singer, comic, and actor. Besides his skills, Crosby's life was full of problems, loss, and issues that kept people interested. Find out about parts of Bing Crosby's life and work that not many people know about in this interesting list of facts. Born with a different name. When Bing Crosby was born, he was given a new name, Harry Lillis Crosby Jr. He came into the world in 1903 in Tacoma, Washington. His father built the house where he was born, but in 1906 the family moved to a different house in eastern Washington Estate, which is where he grew up. He chose to go by the name Bing as an adult, which came from the name of his favorite game as a child, Cops and Robbers. He was known to say "Bing, Bing, Bing" every time he shot someone while he played. Another reason behind his name. Bing was his nickname, and many people thought it came from his love of the TV show Cops and Robbers. But there's another. For some strange reason, a family friend used to call Crosby Bingo from Bingville when he was a child. There was a newspaper called the Bingville Bugle in Tacoma and Spokane, Washington, where Crosby lived with his family all the time. The neighbors liked the name so much that he started calling Crosby Bing. He had no idea that the name would last for so long. The most admired man. Crosby didn't just become famous for his music. He was also liked by his fans because of how he interacted with them and lived his life in general. He also got involved with several causes that were important to him, speaking to a wider audience than just his music fans. Yank magazine said at the time that Crosby was the person who had done the most to boost the spirit of soldiers serving abroad during World War II. As if that wasn't enough, American Studies in 1948 found that he was the most respected man living. A pioneer of a new type of music. Crosby did a lot of important things, but one thing that stands out is his groundbreaking work in music. That's how the American music style called crooning got its start. It was common for artists to sing in a style called belting before he became famous and ruled the charts. This style let their voices be heard throughout the whole concert hall, especially when they didn't have mics. His marriage paid the price. Because they're so well-known, artists like Crosby almost always have to give up something in their lives. For Crosby, it was his wife. It wasn't going so well for Crosby in his marriage when he was at the top of the charts and the world in the 1930s. Crosby and his wife, Dixie Lee, were often asked to big parties. Lee drank a little too much to keep up with Crosby and his groups of famous people. Her drinking got so bad that Crosby thought about breaking up with her. The Guinness Book of World Records. Crosby set a lot of goals for himself, and he was sure that he would reach many of them during his career. He had a lot of hits, and White Christmas is still the best-selling record in music history. Many more people heard the song back then, but we can still hear it around Christmas time. Even though Irving Berlin wrote the song and it came out in 1941, Crosby had to record it again in 1947 because it was so famous. A triple team. The duo worked with Dorothy Lamour in 7 Road to Musical comedies, which made people think that maybe the pair was a triple threat after all. In the series, the first movie was Road to Singapore in 1940, then Road to Zanzibar in 1941, then Road to Morocco 1942, Road to Utopia 1946, then Road to Rio in 1947, then Road to Bali in 1952, and finally the Road to Hong Kong in 1962. Each movie was a comedy, and the triple team was working on an 8-film project when something terrible happened that had to be put on hold. A progressive take on weed. People knew that Bing Crosby thought smoking pot was a pretty cool thing to do. In an interview in 1977, he talked about how he thought the plant should be allowed. He was way ahead of his time back then. He did have a different view on drinking, though. A little drinking problem was said to have existed when he was younger, which led to the singer being fired from Paul Whiteman's group. Crosby said that he thought drinking killed people at one point. Until death did them part. Lee was told she had some kind of lung infection, but the papers were mean and made up a story that she had overdosed on sleeping pills. In 1951, more reports spread that the couple was living apart. However, they quickly showed that they were both living in their Los Angeles home in the Holmby Hills district. Even though it looked like they were apart for a short time, they were finally reunited, and there was a good reason for that. Drinking rumors. From what the press said, Crosby's role in The Country Girl seemed to have been too close to home for the actor and singer. People truly thought that Crosby had lost jobs and parts because of his drunkenness, as the idea kept coming up that he had a drinking problem. One of Crosby's biographers says that he told his son that drinking was what killed his mother and that he should never drink again. More than a singer. He's remembered for being a great singer and actor, but the more we learn about him, the more we see that he was so much more. It looks like Crosby was also a big fan of the business. Over the years, he started and ran several companies and groups. He put money into a recording studio in LA, videotape players, and the Minute Maid orange juice business. Not only that, but Crosby also owned a racehorse, a stable in California, and 25% of the Pittsburgh Pirates baseball team. Time for hobbies. It looks like Crosby found time for some of his hobbies, even though he had a lot going on elsewhere. Golf was one of his favorite sports, and he played it whenever he had time. The man was a member of more than 75 golf clubs across the country, which let him play whenever he pleased. People think the membership fees were pretty pricey, but that didn't matter when you were talking about Crosby, who was a big deal. Changing the course of radio. People even thought at one point that he wanted to switch to recorded shows so that he could play golf more often. It's said that this led to an error in the radio to this date. Crosby's radio shows used to be produced by networks that liked to show his work live, but he demanded that they start taping it all ahead of time in the studio so he'd have more time. It was never proven that golf was the reason, but pre-recording shows became common in the radio world. But he did like golf. He decided to pre-record his work for the radio station because he loved golf. Crosby went on to show that golf was more important to him than many of his other career choices. To give you an example, Crosby turned down the chance to play Columbo on the famous mystery TV show from the 1970s. Why? He seems to have been shooting the pilot at the same time as a big golf event he was signed up for. His other legacy. Okay, this is the last thing we have to say about golf, but it's impossible not to talk about it because Crosby's sport was so much a part of his life and impact. In 1937, Crosby chose to hold a big golf game called the Crosby Clambake. It was such a hit that it continued every year after the war, except this time it was held at Pebble Beach's golf grounds. The event is now called the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am and is one of the biggest in the country. A severe injury. Chris Cross had a very bad time in March 1977. As he was enjoying his 50th year in show business, a filmed event was put together to honor his amazing career. Though it's too bad that he had a little accident right after his show. He fell off the stage and into the orchestra pit. Bob Hope, his artistic partner and close friend, watched it all helplessly, and Crosby would need a long time to get better. It was said that at his age, it was hard to get back to normal after a fall like the one he had. Making small choices. When you think about the Great Depression, it makes sense that not many records were sold. A lot of people couldn't buy records because they had to save a small amount of money for important things. At the same time, singers were paid a flat fee to play their music. But Jack Kemp, the founder of a recording company, had an idea. He came up with a new plan to boost sales. The price at the time was $1 per single. He planned to charge 35 cents instead. You might be thinking, though, what does this have to do with Bing Crosby? The big change. At that time, the painters were paid a flat fee that was too high, so it didn't seem possible to lower the price to 35 cents. But it looked like Kemp's idea could work in some way. For his plan to work, artists would have to decide to stop getting paid for their work and instead accept a share for each record that sells. Crosby was one of the first artists to agree with this, and many other artists did it too because he was so well known. The day he passed away. After having a heart attack 4 days after his last show at the Brighton Center, Crosby died. He was on his way back from a round of golf in Madrid, Spain. He was buried at the Holy Cross Cemetery in California afterward. He died in Spain, though, so a memorial sign was put up for him at the golf course in Spain where he was coming back from when he had his heart attack. His last Christmas show, which had David Bowie as a guest, aired more than a month after he died. A betrayal from his son. After his father died, Gary Crosby, one of Bing's kids from his first marriage to Lee, wrote a sad book about how he had a hard time getting along with his dad. There were a lot of mean things said and charges made in the book that would have hurt Crosby if he were still alive. Going My Own Way was the title of his book, in which he wrote about his life with his abusive father. The most disturbing claims. He said some troubling things, like that Bing was very critical of Gary Crosby's weight and would sometimes hit him with a metal bat if he didn't meet the weekly weight goal that Bing set for him. Aside from that, he said that Bing would call Gary names like my fat-assed kid and bucket butt, which was terrible for Gary. As Gary put it, Crosby would sometimes hit him until he saw the first drop of blood, which told him to stop. Brothers against brothers. Even though Gary thought he was telling the truth, his brother Philip Crosby quickly defended him. Philip said that Gary was lying about everything, just like the crybaby he had always been, after reading what his brother had written about their father. Philip disputed most of what Gary said, but he did say that Bing did hit his kids sometimes, but not as much as Gary said. He also said the punishment would be fair most of the time. Harsher words towards his brother. Philip kept saying that their dad wasn't the monster Gary was making him out to be, so the brothers kept fighting. As time went on, Philip got even meaner to Gary. He called him a liar, an idiot, an ugly person, and someone who was only after the money that came with their father's fame. He even said that he would hate his brother until the day he died for bringing his father's name into disrepute. Another tragic ending. Since there's a lot of trouble and fighting between the two brothers, it would be nice if things were better between Crosby's other children from his first marriage and second marriage. The sad truth is that no one could have imagined a more terrible finish. Lindsay and Dennis Crosby both killed themselves within 2 years of each other. Gary Crosby was later found to have lung cancer and also died a few years later. Philip also passed away soon after, having a heart attack. Not all was bad. Even though the series of terrible events was heartbreaking, luckily the rest of the family would not be in pain. After becoming a famous investment banker, Bing's son Harry, from his second marriage, played the lead role in the first Friday the 13th movie. His daughter Mary became an actress and was a star on the popular TV show Dallas. His son Nathaniel, on the other hand, chose to become a golfer like his dad and won the U.S. amateur title in 1981. Staying in the family. But it looks like something strange happened in one of Crosby's family ties. Pat Sheehan, a woman Bing Crosby had a short relationship with in the past, came back into his life years later. Even though the relationship was short, Crosby went ahead and asked her to marry him. Well, Sheehan married Crosby's son Dennis in 1958, which made a lot of people very nervous. It got even worse when she posed for Playboy, which led to even more negative comments about her. One of the most beloved artists. Bing Crosby was one of the most famous and loved artists of his time, even though his death didn't have the best effects on those around him, especially his children. The singer and actor worked until the end of his life and still found time for his family and his love of golf. This showed how determined and full of life he was. After all, his unmatched ability brought to mind every Christmas when we enjoy the season through his timeless masterpieces. If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon